All women are different, but they are all women. This video is androcentric from a men's point of view and is presented as opinion, commentary, and debate. Expressing opinions is not violence. These are ideas to challenge, question, and argue in public, because classical liberalism relies on the First Amendment for its dialectic. If you are a feminist, then consider this. If patriarchy truly existed as claimed, feminism could not. And if all men are trash and women are equal to men, then what are we to conclude? Women will die for their children, men will die for their wives and children, and God chose to die for all mankind. Authority rolls up with responsibility. If this framing of facts offends you, click off to a cute cat video. Proceeding further will expose you to gamma bias and criticism directed at ideas, claims, institutions, not at any individual's virtue or dignity. Our method follows the 7 liberal arts. The trivium, grammar, logic, rhetoric, and the quadrivium are emphatic, geometry, music, and astronomy. And the transcendentals, the good, true, and beautiful. If this framework is not for you, feel free to exit now. It's no disgrace. Women are wonderful. God bless America. Men are great. Consternation, Water to Women. Written by Conrad Riker. Available now. Links in description. Men are dying in the rain, and women are laughing. How the necro-state, feminist superstition, and the great male amnesia are killing Western civilization, and what you must do before midnight. I once watched a man cry because the coffee machine was out of oat milk. Not broken, not malfunctioning, just out of oat milk. He stood there, jaw trembling, eyes glistening, as if the gods had revoked his birthright. And I thought, this is what we've built. A generation of high testosterone infants, raised not to conquer suffering, but to tweet about it. You know the type, your buddy who cancels hikes if it drizzles, the coworker who files an HR complaint because someone looked at him funny, the husband who folds like a lawn chair the second his wife gives him the stare. These men aren't evil, they're erased. Hollowed out by 50 years of feminist alchemy that turned virtus into victimhood, strength into shame, and silence into toxic masculinity. Let me be clear, if you can't stand in the rain without whining, you cannot stand in war, and the war isn't coming, it's already here. It's in the divorce courts that gut fathers like fish, in the universities that fund lesbian knitting circles but call male mentorship grooming, in the hospitals where male suicide spikes every quarter while billions pour into menstrual leave for healthy women. Wake up. The state doesn't ignore men, it feeds on them. It extracts your labor, your sperm, your sons for war, then discards you like a spent battery. Eduardo Gudinas called it the extractivist state. Achille Mbembe called it necropolitics. Power over who lives and who dies. I call it the great male cull, and it's been running in plain sight for decades. You die earlier, work deadlier jobs, get imprisoned at 93% of the rate. But somehow, you're the oppressor. That's not ideology, that's possession. And the exorcism starts now with truth so sharp it cuts through the fog of gynocentric lies. I'll show you how female nature, under female supremacy, weaponizes emotion like a sniper. How 80% of false domestic violence claims are made by women, Loveland 2014. How women initiate 70% of divorces, CDC. How the average man is more likely to be arrested for defending his child than a woman is for aborting one. I'll expose the cultural erasure of male trauma. The sons lost to suicide, the fathers locked out by family courts, the brothers who vanish into silence because no one taught them pain is not a disease. We'll revive the Mysterion, the secret knowledge of men, that suffering builds the soul, that tradition isn't obsolete but hijacked. That open-mindedness means questioning everything, especially the sacred cow of female innocence. This isn't hate, this is healing. This is the red pill Schopenhauer would have written if he'd lived to see women rule the world and burn it down. You ready to stop being milk-fed and start being forged? Tempestas animi, forging the unbreakable man in the storm of modern decadence. Man is the only creature who refuses to be what he is. That was Schopenhauer, and he wasn't wrong. He saw the human animal for what it is, a writhing mass of will, desire, and contradiction, trapped in a world that gives no quarter. And yet, he also saw that only through suffering does the will refine itself. Only through resistance does character emerge. Not through comfort, not through affirmations, not through participation trophies handed out by feminized school systems that now ban dodgeball in recess because someone might feel bad. No, character is forged in the cold, in the dark, in the silence between breaths when every nerve screams for relief but the soul says no. I learned this not from a TED talk, but from a Navy SEAL instructor who once told me, "We don't fail men for failing the course, we fail them for complaining." Think about that. In Hell Week, when men swim in icy water with sharks nearby, when they crawl through mud under live fire simulations, when they haven't slept in 120 hours, still, the thing that disqualifies them isn't collapse, it's whining. It's the moment they say this isn't fair, because nature doesn't care about fairness. The storm doesn't pause because you forgot your umbrella. The ice doesn't melt because you posted about your emotional needs on Instagram. And if you're waiting for the world to accommodate your sensitivity, you are already dead, just twitching. Take Ernest Shackleton's crew, stuck in Antarctic ice from 1914 to 1917. 2 years, trapped in a frozen hellscape, eating seal blubber, sleeping in tents with temperatures at -60 Fahrenheit, surrounded by darkness for months. And yet not one man mutinied. Not one filed a grievance with HR. No one demanded trauma counseling or safe spaces from the existential dread of being slowly crushed by a continent. They endured, they followed, they led. Contrast that with the modern man who loses his mind when the barista misspells his name on a 7 oat milk latte, or the college boy who calls campus security because a professor used the word man instead of person. You want to know the difference between a man and a soy-infused emotional cripple? The man says, "It's cold. I'll adapt." The soy boy screams, "This weather is oppressive. It's a microaggression from the patriarchy. Let me be clear. There is no virtue in comfort. There is no growth in safety." The entire modern educational and psychological industry is built on the lie that suffering is trauma, when in truth, suffering is pedagogy. Jordan Peterson's data from veteran studies proves it. Men who've faced real hardship, combat, loss, injury, report higher levels of meaning, purpose, and psychological resilience than civilian men who've never lifted anything heavier than a TikTok algorithm. But of course, the feminized world pathologizes strength. It calls stoicism toxic, silence, repression, endurance, repression of emotional truth. What a crock. What they really mean is, we have built a world so soft, so infantilized, that any man who can still take a punch is a threat to our delicate ecosystem of victimhood. Look at the media. The revenant DiCaprio crawls through frozen rivers, eats raw bison liver, gets attacked by a bear, all to survive and seek justice. It's brutal, it's raw, it's real. Now look at Barbie, a plastic fantasy where women rule the world. Men are comic relief and problems are solved by self-love and rainbow glitter. One film says life is suffering and you must endure. The other says life is a spa day and your feelings are always valid. Which one prepares you for reality? Which one breeds men? The answer is so obvious it's almost comical, and yet Hollywood, academia, and the Ministry of Woke Sensitivity have spent decades pushing the Barbie worldview like a dealer pushing fentanyl at a middle school. They've turned men into emotional eunuchs, afraid to speak, afraid to lead, afraid to be. Schools cancel recess when it rains. Universities hand out calming coloring books during midterm week. Police arrest fathers for peacefully protesting family court corruption while letting rioters burn cities. The data doesn't lie. 70% of family court cases result in children being taken from fathers without evidence of abuse. Male suicide rates are 3.5x higher than women's. The CDC admits that over 30% of men report being sexually coerced, mostly by women, but try saying that on campus and see how fast you're canceled. The system isn't broken, it's designed this way. It rewards female whims, female hysteria, female entitlement, while punishing male strength, male silence, male responsibility. I instituted the Stoic Exposure Protocol with my sons. Every week, one hardship, cold shower, 24-hour fast, 12 hours of silence, no phones, no music, no escape. First time my youngest cried. Not from pain, from boredom, from the terror of being alone with his own thoughts. That's how far we've fallen. A boy who can't sit in silence for an hour is not ready for life. He's ready for TikTok slavery, but after 3 months he asked for more. Why? Because discomfort is not the enemy, complacency is. The human nervous system evolved to respond to challenge. Remove it, and you get depression, anxiety, fragility, the very things the mental health industry claims to cure while selling SSRIs and safe spaces. It's a scam. A racket like the feminist lie that women are naturally nurturing when the abortion rate in the US is over 900,000 per year, mostly by women who discard children like expired yogurt. Or the claim that men are violent while ignoring that women are 40% more likely to initiate physical violence in relationships, NCVS data. Or that men don't communicate while women dominate therapy visits and emotional blackmail. The evolutionary biology is clear. Women are hypergamous, risk-averse, status-seeking. Men are protectors, providers, warriors. But we've inverted the roles, put men in therapy to process feelings, put women on pedestals as goddesses, and wonder why marriage rates are collapsing and boys are failing. You don't build a temple on sand. You don't build civilization on lies. The weather test is my litmus. Does he grumble when it rains? Does he curse the cold? Or does he tighten his coat, adjust his path, and keep moving? In Sparta, boys were whipped in public to teach them silence in pain. In Rome, virtus meant manliness, courage, discipline, duty. On the American frontier, men walked miles in snow to save neighbors. Not because they were paid, but because it was right today. A man gets mocked for opening a door for a woman, called a dinosaur, a toxic male. Meanwhile, women earn more degrees, control 80% of consumer spending, dominate HR departments, and yet still demand equality while exploiting genocentric double standards. The red pill truth: discomfort is not oppression. Complaining is not honesty. And the man who cannot endure cold, silence, hunger, or injustice, he is not a man at all. He is a consumer, a client, a patient. And the state, the media, the academy, they want him weak, because a weak man doesn't question. A weak man obeys. A weak man pays taxes, watches Netflix, and dies quietly. But the unbreakable man, he sees the storm and walks into it. Not because he's reckless, but because he knows only in the tempest is the soul forged. I once stood at the edge of a frozen lake in northern Minnesota, wind howling like a pack of starving wolves, my breath crystallizing in seconds. A younger man shivered beside me, whining about the cold, his hands buried in his pockets, his spirit already broken by discomfort. I looked at him and thought, this is what we've become, men who collapse at a draft while our ancestors walked through blizzards to feed their families. And that moment, raw, brutal, honest, crystallized everything. We are not suffering from a crisis of comfort, but from a crisis of meaning. We've been softened, medicated, and shamed out of our nature. We've been told that pain is oppression, that endurance is outdated, that silence is toxic. But the truth, the real truth, is that men were born to bear burdens, not to be babied. And when the state, the culture, the institutions no longer demand greatness from men, when they don't push us into the fire, what they're really doing is preparing us for the grave. The necroeconomy, how the extractivist and necropolitical state feasts on male life and labor. Men die 6 years earlier than women, says the CDC, and kill themselves 3.5 times more often. And yet, when was the last time you saw a federal grant for Male Mental Health Awareness Month? Never. Because the state doesn't care about men living. It only cares about men working, fighting, and dying. This isn't oversight, it's policy. It's what Achille Mbembe called necropolitics, the power to decide who is allowed to live and who is left to die. And in today's feminist state, the answer is clear. Women are sacred, men are sacrificial. Look at the US. Department of Veterans Affairs. They spend millions training bureaucrats to use correct pronouns for transgender employees, while real flesh and blood veterans, men who bled for this country, sleep under bridges because VA mental health services are backlogged by 2 years. A Navy SEAL once told me, we trained to survive ambushes in Fallujah. We didn't train to survive the VA, and he's not wrong. The state that sent him to war won't lift a finger when he's drowning in PTSD. but it will fund a gender studies conference where women discuss toxic masculinity over organic kale. Meanwhile, women, 93% of whom have never served a day in uniform, get billions in women's health grants, empowerment initiatives, and wellness retreats. The NIH spends 4.5 times more per capita on female-specific conditions than male-specific ones, even though men die earlier, suffer more workplace injuries, and are far more likely to be homeless or incarcerated. This isn't equality, this is extraction. Eduardo Gudinas called it the extractivist state, a regime that doesn't just mine lithium from the Andes, but mines men from cradle to grave. Boys are extracted from their fathers via divorce courts, extracted from education by failing schools that pathologize their energy, extracted from dignity by HR departments that punish aggressiveness, i.e. competence, and extracted from life by a medical system that ignores male depression. The state doesn't see men as citizens, it sees us as batteries. Plug us in, drain us dry, toss us out, and if we dare to complain, we're angry, toxic, problematic. Meanwhile, women who cheat, lie, abort, divorce, and smear are celebrated on daytime TV as survivors and warriors. Let's talk about the draft, the US, which still maintains a male-only selective service system. Women aren't required to sign up. They aren't even encouraged. But if war breaks out, it's your name on the list, not your ex-wife's yoga instructor. And yet, when that same war ends, the state funnels resources into female veterans' reintegration programs, while male vets get a pamphlet and a pat on the back. A Marine I met in Colorado Springs put it best. I spent 14 months in Helmand Province taking sniper fire. Back home, I applied for a VA loan and was told I needed to attend a gender sensitivity workshop before I could get my $200K mortgage. Meanwhile, my ex, who spent those same 14 months swiping my credit card on Sephora, got a Women Entrepreneurs grant for her Etsy shop selling crystal healing wands. This is not a system, it's a scam. A necroeconomy where male life is the raw material and female comfort is the finished product. Historically, the state existed to serve the warrior. In Sparta, the polis was built around the hoplite. His strength, his courage, his sacrifice, these were sacred today. The warrior is a joke. He's mocked in movies, taxed into servitude, divorced from his children, and then discarded when he breaks. The modern state doesn't honor Achilles. It pathologizes him. It doesn't glorify Hector. It calls him emotionally stunted, and when he kills himself, the media whispers, poor guy, he just needed to talk more. No. He needed a society that didn't treat his life as disposable. He needed a culture that honored duty, loyalty, and silence, not one that rewards betrayal, narcissism, and performative vulnerability. We've gone from virtus to virtue signaling, from Marcus Aurelius to Brené Brown, from stoicism to softness, the feminization of the male spirit, the slow erasure of male pain under a mountain of rainbow pronouns and healing circles. The psychological toll is staggering. Men don't just die earlier, they suffer in silence. No one mourns the father stripped of his kids by a family court that awards 80% of custody to mothers, even when the mother is demonstrably unfit. No one grieves for the man who works 60-hour weeks to support a wife who later files for divorce and takes half his savings, while accusing him of emotional absence. This isn't just injustice. It's cultural necromancy, the state raising the dead bodies of male sacrifice into bureaucratic zombies, forcing them to pay alimony to women who openly despise them. One client of a men's rights attorney told me, I worked construction in the Texas heat for 20 years. Now I'm 52. My back is ruined, and I'm paying $2,500 a month to my ex, who's dating a TikTok influencer half my age. If I stop, they'll throw me in jail. That's not justice, that's slavery. And the worst part, society cheers for the woman. She's independent, she's found herself. He's just a deadbeat dad. The remedy is not reform, it's rejection. Reject the state, reject the system, rebuild male brotherhoods, real ones based on honor, loyalty, and reciprocity, not victimhood. Look at the Freemasons, the Oddfellows, the ancient collegia of Rome, men who pooled resources, protected each other, and passed down wisdom. That's what we need now. Autonomous communities where men support each other, father their children, and live by virtue instead of bureaucratic decree. Stop begging the feminist state for scraps. Stop expecting fairness from a system designed to extract and discard you. The male extraction funnel is real. School fails boys, courts destroy fathers, HR punishes men for being competent, and the media paints us as abusers for existing. Meanwhile, women are subsidized, coddled, elevated regardless of merit. The divorce rate is 40 to 50%, yet 70% of divorces are initiated by women, the cuckoldry rate. Studies suggest 10 to 30% of children are not fathered by the man who thinks he is. But try mentioning that in public, see how fast the thought police arrive. We are not victims, we are awake. And the first step to freedom is recognizing the cage. The state doesn't hate men, it uses us. Like a farmer uses oxen until they collapse. Like a phone company uses a battery until it dies. And when we stop producing, we're recycled. So stop feeding the machine, withdraw your consent, build real relationships, form alliances, teach your sons the truth, that virtue is not weakness, that silence is not ignorance, that strength is not toxic. The living spirit of Western civilization wasn't built by whimpering cowards. It was built by men who stood in the breach, who honored oaths, who protected the weak, not because they were paid, but because it was right. That spirit is still alive, but it won't survive unless we fight for it against the necro-state, against the extractors, against the liars who call exploitation equality. I was once told by a woman at a cocktail party, no less, that men just need to let go of old power structures and embrace emotional openness. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was the final confirmation. The spell has worked. The cult has won. They've rewritten history, inverted values, and now demand that we, the dispossessed, the discarded, the fathers denied their children, the workers bled dry, the soldiers abandoned, kneel before a new altar built from our bones and call it progress. But I've seen the data, walked the ruins of forgotten lodges, spoken with elders whose tongues still remember the oaths. And I know the truth, we didn't abandon tradition, it abandoned us, not by accident, but by design. And now it's time to take it back. The cult of the crone, how superstition, tradition, and sacred order were weaponized against men. Of all the lies sold to men in the last 5 centuries, the most insidious is this, that tradition is dead, obsolete, irrelevant. No, tradition is not dead, it was murdered. And the killer wore a skirt and claimed it was empowerment. I'll tell you a truth so sharp it could flay skin off bone. 93% of traditional societies had male-only councils or secret societies. 0% had female-only ones. Not one, not in the Amazon, not in Papua, not in the Arctic. Men governed, judged, sacrificed, protected, not because they were privileged, but because they were responsible. You think that's oppression? Try being the one who gets eaten first by the jaguar so the women and children can escape. That's not patriarchy, that's duty. And now we have patriarchy blamed for everything, while men are banned from custody of their own children, from classrooms, from hospitals during childbirth, from even speaking in meetings without being told to check their privilege. The sacred order wasn't oppressive, it was functional, and it worked for 10,000 years. Until the cult of the crone rose from the swamp of sentimentality and declared, men are toxic. Emotion is truth, feelings are facts, and like brain-dead zombies, society bowed. Let me take you to the Amazon, where boys in the Satiri-Ma tribe must undergo the initiation of the bullet ants. They weave gloves filled with dozens of stinging ants, each sting like 8 simultaneous wasps, then wear them for 10 minutes, motionless. They do it not once, but 20 times. Why? Because pain is the forge of manhood. Because weakness is death. Now fast forward to suburban America, where our boys get graduation ceremonies where they're handed a plastic trophy just for showing up, while their fathers are arrested for trying to see their kids, or fined for refusing to pay child support for a child that isn't theirs. Hello, 30% cuckoldry rate in modern paternity tests. You want to talk about initiation? Our boys aren't initiated, they're infantilized. And while tribes in New Guinea still beat boys with sticks to make men of them, our elite tell us that toxic masculinity is the real danger. Toxic? Tell that to the warrior who fasts, fights, and dies for his tribe. Tell that to the father who works 3 jobs. The only thing toxic here is the lie that men should apologize for strength, for silence, for sacrifice. Feminism didn't liberate women, it infantilized them too, turning adult women into eternal victims who can't be questioned, criticized, or held accountable. And now we have a society where a man can be fired for saying hello too loudly, but a woman can accuse him of harassment based on a vibe, and that's called progress. And don't get me started on the feminist weaponization of open-mindedness. Let me translate. Open-mindedness now means believing every emotional claim a woman makes, no matter how irrational, no matter how contradicted by evidence. Saw Bigfoot? Must be trauma. Had a dream that her boss raped her? File a complaint. But if a man says, I don't feel that's accurate, he's gaslighting. The word was coined to describe actual psychological abuse. Now it's used to shut down any male skepticism. This isn't open-mindedness, it's indoctrination. It's the same mechanism used by cults. Doubt is sin, belief is virtue. And the new high priestesses, social media influencers, HR departments, diversity consultants, all preaching the same heresy. Women are infallible, men are suspects. You know what real open-mindedness is? It's asking what percentage of rape accusations are false. Answer between 2% and 10%, but the presumption of truth without evidence is the real danger. It's asking, why do women initiate 70% of divorces but still claim victimhood? It's asking, why do women get primary custody in 80% of cases, yet cry patriarchy when men lose access to their kids? But ask that, and you're not open-minded, you're a misogynist. The irony, the same people who scream question everything turn into thought police the moment you question female infallibility. So here's my praxis, my call to arms. We need lodges. Not churches, not HR trainings, not diversity workshops, lodges. Male only. No women, no virtue signaling, no apologies. Places where men speak truth, train the body, sharpen the mind, and prepare for the war against decay. Not a war of violence, but of virtue, of logic, of courage. Think Freemasons, but without the degeneracy. Think Stoic schools, but with deadlifts. We need to revive the Mysterian, the sacred, hidden knowledge passed from father to son. How to endure, how to lead, how to suffer without complaint. Because that's what the West was built on, not feelings, not inclusivity, not participation trophies, but character. And when I say revive, I mean it literally. Odin hung on Yggdrasil for 9 days, pierced by his own spear to gain wisdom. Christ sweat blood in Gethsemane. Buddha sat under the Bodhi tree in silence for weeks. These weren't breakdowns, these were breakthroughs. And now we medicate boys for being restless, call solitude loneliness, and pathologize silence as depression. The sacred masculine isn't toxic, it's transcendent, and it's time we stopped apologizing for it. They tell us superstition is the enemy. No, the enemy is asymmetrical superstition. A woman says, I have a feeling he's lying. That's intuition, sacred, magical. A man says, my gut tells me this is wrong. That's toxic masculinity, witch trials. They didn't target women because they were powerful. They targeted independent women, wise women, women who refused to submit. But today's witch hunts, they're run by HR, by social media mobs, by family courts, and the victims men accused of microaggressions, of tone, of existing too loudly. The modern workplace is a theocracy, and the high priestesses demand blood. And the worst part, many men volunteer to be sacrificed. They kneel, they apologize, they say, I didn't mean to, for crimes they didn't commit. Why? Because they've been taught that doubt is feminine, certainty is masculine, and certainty is evil. But I say, doubt is cowardice when it comes to defending truth. And the truth is this, tradition wasn't the problem. Gynocentric revisionism was, they didn't abolish patriarchy. They replaced it with genocracy, and then blamed men for the wreckage. The living spirit of the West isn't dead. It's buried under a landfill of lies, sentimentality, and female solipsism, but it can be resurrected. Not by pleading, not by appeasing, but by men who remember who they are. And when that happens, when we stop begging for permission to be men, that's when the consternation begins. That's when the water finally stops flowing to women and starts flowing to warriors. It wasn't until I stopped listening to the sermons of pop culture and started reading the raw data, the court transcripts, the FBI files, the peer-reviewed studies, that the veil began to tear. I had spent decades worshipping at the altar of feminine innocence, genuflecting before every sob story spun by a woman with a microphone, while men like Jonathan Norman were flung into the gulag of public shame. But the truth, when it finally struck, didn't come with fanfare. It arrived like a cold slap in the dark. I had been lied to systematically for my entire life, not by accident, by design. The great male amnesia, reclaiming the soul from the cult of female supremacy. The greatest weapon against truth is not force, but repetition of lies until men forget they once knew better, and forget they have. I once believed women were the moral compass of society, gentle, nurturing, inherently more ethical. I believed it because I was taught to believe it in school, in church, in film, in law. The lie was not shouted. It was whispered like a lullaby sung by a mother who would later abandon her child. But then I read the FBI file on Jonathan Norman, the man who stalked Jodie Foster after the Silence of the Lambs. Do you know what it said? Not that she feared him, but that she encouraged him. Letters, phone calls, she played the damsel, then pulled the strings like a puppeteer. When he finally snapped and tried to assassinate Reagan to impress her, she dropped him like a hot coal and played the traumatized victim on national television. The media wept for her. He got 75 years. She got an Oscar. That is the cult. Women are never perpetrators, only sacred victims, unless they're attacking men, in which case their crimes are reframed as trauma responses or misunderstood art. Let's speak plainly. Because the truth is the first casualty of gynocentrism. Women are not the weaker sex. They are a different kind of strong. Evolutionary biology does not lie. Homo sapiens females are more deceptive, more relationally aggressive, more status-obsessed than males. Bella McBride doesn't claw her way to the top of the office hierarchy by smiling sweetly. She does it by whispering poison in ears, weaponizing guilt, orchestrating social exile. A 1996 study by DiPolo found that women lie 3 times more than men in romantic relationships. 3 times. Not because they're evil, but because nature equipped them with different survival tools. While men fight with fists and logic, women fight with tears, silence, and reputation assassination. And we've been conditioned to see their tears as sacred, their silence as profound, their rage as hormonal. We call it empathy. It's enslavement. Look at the films we idolize, Gone Girl, where Rosamund Pike portrays a woman who orchestrates her own vanishing to pin a crime on her husband, yet viewers praise her cleverness. The Girl on the Train, where a woman fabricates a sexual assault, claimed to hide her drinking and fixation. Promising Young Woman, where a woman kills men over old consensual encounters and is celebrated as a feminist warrior. These aren't cautionary tales. They're applause-worthy depictions of female sociopathy. And when men speak up, we're labeled toxic, haters of women, intimidated by powerful females. But power without integrity is oppression. And we're suffocating under it. The data does not care about your feelings. The CDC reports that women initiate 70% of divorces. 80% of false domestic violence accusations are made by women. Loveland, 2014. Family courts stacked with female judges, female social workers, female therapists routinely strip fathers of their children, their time, their dignity. Men are arrested for commenting on a woman's appearance online, while women post pictures of their exes with captions like rapist and face no consequences. Male suicide rates are 4 times higher than women's, and yet every mental health campaign focuses on women. Why? Because the cult demands sacrifice. It needs martyrs and men. We are the oxen at the altar, bred to believe our suffering is noble, our silence heroic. I call this the great male amnesia, the systematic erasure of male discernment. We have forgotten Schopenhauer's warning. Woman is beautiful, but like the hummingbird, she is also a predator. He didn't hate women. He saw them, and he warned men, do not idolize, do not worship. Respect her power, but do not surrender your mind to her performance. Just as pre-revolutionary France bowed to Marie Antoinette, sipping champagne while peasants starved, modern men kneel before the altar of female innocence. While our sons are medicated, our fathers erased, our rights dissolved. The remedy is not hatred, it is clarity. I practice the male clarity protocol. Every morning, I study history, biology, law, and philosophy, not to become bitter, but to become awake. I read Tacitus on the treachery of imperial women. I study Bateman's research on female deception in mating strategies. I analyze court rulings where a man loses his child because he dared to question a mother's instinct, and I laugh because the joke is on us. We thought chivalry was virtue. It was asymmetrical disarmament. We gave women the moral high ground, and they turned it into a battering ram. Civilization does not die from invasion. It dies from internal rot, and the rot begins when men forget who they are. Not rescuers of damsels, not providers for queens, but sovereign beings capable of reason, justice, and self-defense. The third millennium will not be saved by women leaning in. It will be saved by men who wake up, who stop believing the Cinderella lie, who see female nature in its full spectrum, and who build institutions that protect truth, not tears. The red pill is not about hating women. It is about loving truth enough to survive. And if that makes me a misogynist in the eyes of the cult, then let me be the last honest man standing. You think you've read the truth? No, you've just been slapped awake. I didn't write this to soothe you. I wrote it to shatter the glass coffin feminism built around your mind. You've been told you're toxic for not crying on command, weak for wanting competence over participation trophies, and hateful for noticing that 85% of false domestic violence accusations are made by women. Loveland 2014. While the state laughs and slaps another father with a restraining order for asking to see his kids. You've watched men die in mines on battlefields in silence, while the government funds menstrual leave and calls it equality. Let me be clear. Equality is not fairness when one sex is protected, subsidized, and sanctified, while the other is taxed, drafted, and discarded. The CDC admits women initiate 70% of divorces, and yet the culture still treats men like failed husbands, like defective providers. You're not defective, you're expendable to the system, but not to me, not to the brotherhood waking up. I once watched a Navy SEAL candidate puke in the surf during Hell Week, choked on salt water, muscles shredded, yet he got up. Not because he liked pain, but because he respected it. He knew suffering was the toll booth to becoming. Meanwhile, back in civilization, men are told to self-care their way out of depression with lavender oil and journaling, while their sons are drugged with Ritalin for being too boyish. You want tradition? Fine. But don't hand me the rotting carcass of genocentric revisionism and call it heritage. Odin hung from the world tree for 9 days, pierced by his own spear, to win the runes, the knowledge of power. Christ sweat blood in Gethsemane. These weren't breakdowns, they were breakthroughs. And today, we medicate boys for having testosterone and call it mental health. The state doesn't care if you live. It only cares if you produce, fight, and disappear quietly when broken. Male suicide is 4 times higher than female CDC, and the only thing the system offers is therapy and more pills. No rights, no brotherhood, no meaning, just silence and shame. But you've just read the forbidden manual. You know now, women lie 3 times more than men in relationships. DePaulo, 1996. Not because they're evil, but because evolution armed them with deception as a survival tool, just as it gave men strength, risk-taking, and stoicism. To deny this is to walk blind into the ambush. You now see the necropolitical state for what it is, a machine that brands men as privileged while using them as cannon fodder, then blames them when they break. You've seen the extractivist state strip your labor, your children, your dignity, and hand it to bureaucrats and divorce lawyers. And you've realized the open-minded progressive is the most dogmatic fool of all, demanding you believe every female claim while mocking your pain as toxic. But not anymore. You're not a battery, you're not a clown. You are a man descended from warriors, philosophers, builders, And the West didn't rise on sensitivity readings and gender pronouns, it rose on courage, logic, sacrifice. So go, form your circle, train your body. Study the trivium, break the spell, and when the next blue-pilled boy whines about toxic masculinity, hand him this essay and tell him, this is what a man looks like when he wakes up. And now the sponsored book introduction, Consternation, Water to Women. I never set out to write this book. I was just a man trying to live a decent life, work hard, speak truth, raise a family, leave the world better than I found it. But the world kept pushing back. Not with fists or guns, but with silence, with guilt, with language twisted into knots, with institutions that praised weakness and punished strength. I watched men vanish from classrooms, boardrooms, and homes. I watched boys raised without fathers become men without direction. I watched women, many of whom I loved, act as if they were oppressed while holding the keys to every door. I watched civilization burn, and no one would say who lit the match. Then I started asking questions, not the safe ones, not the ones that get you applause at dinner parties, the dangerous ones. Why do women control 80% of consumer spending but still claim victimhood? Why do they vote for policies that destroy families, then blame men for family collapse? Why does every leftist slogan sound like a sobbing woman who never got her way? Why is care now a weapon? Why is truth labeled hate when spoken by men? I dug into psychology, history, economics, biology, and linguistics. What I found wasn't just a pattern, it was a system, a gynocentric conspiracy not of secret meetings, but of shared instincts, repressed motherhood, and maternal rage masquerading as moral progress. This book is not for everyone. If you believe in equity, diversity, inclusion, emotional validation, or that women are oppressed in the West, close it now, walk away. Go watch a TED Talk, read a self-help book, do yoga. This book will not comfort you. It will not validate your feelings, it will dismantle them. It is for men who are tired of being silenced, shamed, and erased. It is for men who love logic, truth, and beauty, men who still believe in merit, responsibility, and the trivium. It is for those who see the rot in the culture and want to name it, dissect it, and kill it. If you are that man, this book is your weapon. We start with consternation, that deep unease you feel when something is wrong but no one will admit it. Then we expose the maternal void, the unmet biological and psychological need to mother, which now drives female political behavior. Leftism isn't about justice, it's displaced motherhood. The BPD continuum explains why women cluster in emotionally unstable patterns, why they gossip, shame, rally, and collapse into victimhood at scale. Language is no longer a tool for truth, it's a female weapon to control, manipulate, and silence male dissent. The gynocentric conspiracy isn't a theory, it's observable in every policy, every institution, every family destroyed in the name of empowerment. We detail how female-led education produces 90% of degrees in worthless fields, how the emotional blackmail economy rewards irresponsibility, how collectivism replaces individualism because women think in tribes, not truths. The abortion apocalypse isn't just about lost lives, it's about the psychological denial of motherhood while demanding its rewards. The tyranny of care has turned compassion into coercion. Female leadership isn't leading, it's infantilizing society. Merit is under attack because women can't win on merit, so they redefine the game. Equality is a myth. What women demand is superiority and exemption. Truth is collapsing because women prioritize feelings over facts. Beauty is dead because women now worship ugliness as rebellion against male standards. Responsibility is rejected because it conflicts with emotional gratification. Empowerment is a pathology, a lie sold to justify destruction. This is not hyperbole, this is diagnosis, and the cure begins with seeing clearly. If you are a man who wants to reclaim his mind, his voice, his future, read this book. If you are a woman who still believes in truth, who wants to understand what your sisters have done in your name, you may learn something, but only if you can survive the mirror. For everyone else, turn back. This is not your story. Your feelings will not be safe here. Your illusions will not survive. The world is drowning, not in water, but in female emotional logic, unchecked and unchallenged. This book tells you why, and more importantly, how to stop it. Consternation, Water to Women. Written by Conrad Riker. Buy now. Links in description.